Hey, what's going on, everybody? What is happening? Paul Turner here from thediscipleproject.net. So glad to be with you today. Happy to be a part. A little late today, even later than I thought it was going to be, because I was in a little bit away from the church doing something good for my wife, for giving her her Mother's Day gift. And so I'm super glad to be with you guys. You guys get to, I think maybe this is the first time I've gone live from my office, so you can clearly see that nothing changes right here, okay? You still got stuff laying around, stuff just kind of laying around here. So, of course, don't forget nugs, not drugs. But yeah, so as all of you that are going to be gathering in here today, first of all, welcome. If you've never been part of the office hours before, I usually get on here for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes max, and I answer youth ministry questions. So if you have a question, feel free to go ahead and jump in the chat there. Leave a question in the chat. Also, if you're watching this later on, well, you can go ahead and leave a comment down below, and I will get to that, and I will answer that on another day. So yeah, before we get into that today, if you're like I said, if you're brand new here today, would love for you to hit that subscribe button today. Hit that subscribe button, and also don't forget the like button and the bell button, because all those matter, right? Because well, the bell one matters even more because well, you'll know when I go live, and so would love for you to do that so you can know when I go live. You can jump on here, we can talk, have a conversation. Of course, if you hit the subscribe button, well, you're going to get videos like this in your inbox on a regular basis, not just live. And of course, if you hit that like button, that just makes my heart happy. And today's my birthday. That's right. Today is my birthday. So if you want to just do something nice, go and click the subscribe button and the thumbs up button and the bell icon. It's three gifts in one. I mean, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with that. And so thank you so much for doing that. Let me go ahead and get rid of this stuff here. And we'll get into it here in just a second, waiting for people to come on in. And if you are, like I said, just coming in, be sure to go ahead and um, uh, tell me where you're from. Put that in the comments as well and say, hey, where's everybody coming in from? And then we will go ahead and get into it. We'll be back on regular schedule next week, prayer at 8 a.m. 8 a.m. every Wednesday, and then 11 a.m. We'll be back on schedule, 11 a.m. for office hours then. So if you're looking for resources for the summer, if you haven't been by my store yet, I want to recommend that you go by there. And you can check out gumroad.com, Youth Men Resources. If you go by there, tons of resources. If you're looking for Bible studies, if you're looking for, uh, sermon series, if you're looking for just fun stuff that you can do, what am I thinking about? Escape rooms. Right? I have an escape room on there that you can use. But yeah, lots of stuff in there you can use for your ministry. So be sure to check that out. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the questions here. Okay, question number one. This is a question that I see a lot across social media and just in when I'm gathering with other youth pastors, people will ask this question: is what is really working for you in Sunday school? And I think Sunday school is such an interesting idea in the sense that you have a 45-minute period of time. Let's say 45 minutes is standard, at least it's for me, for my group. So 45 minutes of time that you have with students, and you literally can use that time for whatever it is you want. Now, you would think traditionally on a Sunday morning, well, you're going to teach just a Bible study, so forth. That's right, and you're going to teach them, some sort of doctrinal thing or foundational things, which is nothing wrong with that. The question is, what works on a Sunday morning? What's working in Sunday school? And I know that, listen, we all want students to show up bright eyed, bushy tailed, ready to learn, step in our class, and be uber excited on a Sunday morning at 9 a.m., 9:30, somewhere around there. And that's just not the case. So I think we have to have our expectations set to a certain degree, keeping in mind that it's 9:30 in the morning and that our students are coming in and they're coming in from whatever they did on Saturday. They got sports happening, all the things. I'm not excusing them. I'm just saying that's the reality of the situation. And in knowing that, I can tell you what's going on in my class. I am teaching right now. I'm teaching one more lesson coming up on leadership. I find that this is a good place to talk about some very applicable things. Not necessarily they're not what I would say knowledge based things per se, but they're super applicable in the sense of saying, look, we want to talk about leadership because, and the way I talk about leadership is not only is it leadership principles that they can use in everyday life, but then I get to talk about leadership within the scope of our youth ministry. And I get to share those kind of things. And once again, leadership, there's theology to leadership, right? Jesus says, look, to whom much is given, much is required, right? So talking about leadership, is to me a part of something you can teach on a Sunday morning. But I also give my students 15 minutes to do nothing up front. I don't start on time ever because I want them to come in. I want them to sit down. It's not like school that when the bell rings, that suddenly we're now into learning mode. And so what I do is make sure I have a pantry filled with cereal and Pop Tarts, orange juice, all those things. So they got that first 15 minutes to kind of because I think what we're doing too as youth workers, we think, well, man, Paul, I got to fill up that whole 45 minutes with nothing but teaching. And I'm saying, well, you can look at it that way, or you could say, look, 15 minutes of them coming in, eating, getting comfortable. They're not running just right from the car, sitting down, and suddenly they're in the lesson. But you're giving them some space to kind of decompress from getting up early, driving with their mom and dad, coming to Sunday school, and you get that 15 minutes. And now you look, well, Paul, is 30 minutes enough? I think 30 minutes is more than enough to teach a lesson. So I think what works on a Sunday morning is based on our expectations of what works. For me, it's all discipleship. For me, sitting there eating a Pop-Tart with a bunch of kids is as much discipleship as me teaching them on the authority of Christ or, or the second coming or, some doctrinal thing like that. Both need to be known, right? There's the relational part, but then there's the information they need. But the to me, real discipleship doesn't happen when I'm teaching the lesson. Teaching the lesson is what I do. The discipleship part comes in when questions come up, when when a life thing comes up and something I've taught applies to that. And so really the 52 weeks a year that you're teaching, let's say, they're not all going to be these, people are not going to sit there and salivate over your teaching. What they are going to do is you're going to come in and, like I said, how you divide up that time. If you have 45 minutes, if 15 minutes of that time is just sitting there and talking about life and what did you do this weekend, and then the second 15 minutes is about, maybe it's the lesson, and then the last 15 minutes is some sort of practical application of some kind that of something. Maybe it's they're journaling it, maybe they're creating on their phones or creating some sort of make a graphic based on what I taught today, right? So you're tapping into various levels rather than just a strict I'm teaching, you're listening process of learning. You're using that 45 minutes to engage them at various levels, and keeping in mind that the lesson itself isn't the discipleship part as much as the teaching's a part of it, but it's not the whole thing. But that you're baking into that 45 minutes, that relationship time to be able to have with them. So, what is working in Sunday school? That depends. Depends what you're doing, depends on your philosophy of it, depends on how long you think you should be teaching. It depends on a lot of things. But I can tell you what works for me, and that works for me. The 15 minutes of just come in, hang out, and then I take that 15-minute hang out, do announcements, opportunities, serving opportunities, whatever it may be, and then teach for that 30 minutes, and then release them. And so we go from there. So hopefully that answers your question. What works in Sunday school? Well, That works for me. I hope you find something that works for you. Second thing is, somebody, this is a question about games. It says, the question is, to what extent is game time required for every teen during youth group? How much time, in other words, how much time should you spend playing games? And I don't think there's a time. I think you fit it to your group. It depends. If your whole focus of the night is games, then just play games. If you say, Paul, don't we have to have a lesson? You can. I would do it before you start playing games, though. And then, there is no proprietary time. You could say you could do the first 15 minutes of your youth group and do that. That's, standard. I don't want to say it's standard, but the first 15 minutes or so is a game, or depending on what you're doing. It depends what the point of the game is too. Are we running off energy? Is it part of the lesson? Does it teach something? Is it community building? Is it team building? Is it problem solving? That kind of just depends. And the other challenge of that too is that, listen, I know everybody does not necessarily, I don't know about your group, but I've had groups where a lot of the guys will participate, but maybe not so much the girls. And if you have a challenge with your girls, competing or playing the game, my suggestion would be, we'll just have girls plan the game. Girls, what game would you like to play? I'll just have a team of girls, 3 or 4 girls. Girls, you're in charge of this. You could do it, for a couple of weeks. This week it's the guys' turn. This week is the girls' turn, and do that for a month. Just have each group plan whatever the game is, get with you, you get supplies, all that kind of good stuff there. But there's no mandatory game time unless what you build into it. And it depends how long your lesson is. If your lesson is going to be longer, well, then shorten your game time. If your lesson is super short, then extend your game time. And if you have worship in there and so forth, well, then that all kind of complements the whole thing. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about how long it is. I would base it on, because unless it's a whole games night, then I wouldn't worry about it. But if you're saying, look, I gotta, how long is my message? And what do I really, I always say, start with the end in mind. What does at the end of your meeting looks like? And if the game helps contribute to the end goal of that meeting, then play it. If a game does not lend itself to the goal at the end of your meeting, then don't play it. Keep the end of your meeting in mind, and don't play games that are if you want people to get really serious real quick, don't play. Don't take them outside and run them ragged for 30 minutes and then expect them to come in and listen. They're going to be wore out. They're going to be really tired. So keep in mind what the goal of your youth meeting is, and then plan accordingly. And then the last question, once again, is, Jeff Blakely. Good to see you here, Jeff Blakely. Question is, Jeff asks, what would you use for discipleship one-on-one? Well, it's a good question. I tend to, when I have one-on-one conversations, my conversations with students, if you're wanting to make it like official, I would say that maybe you read a book together, something that's going to be in, like it's devotional in that sense. So maybe you're reading a devotional book together and you sit and you kind of say, hey, what did you get from it? What did you get from it? And you kind of share some thoughts. Your one-on-one could be, it could be something like scripture memory, right? It could be topical. I don't have a resource per se that I use for one-on-one, because I think for me, I try to keep it, unless the student wants something. I think you have to look at your student too. Is your student, structured? Are the students that you have, or do they have I would find out kind of like your students' learning thing, like how do they learn best, and then lean into that. So if it's a book and you say, look, here's just a blank journal, or you say, here's 30 questions we're going to cover over the next year. Or 52 questions if you're going to do it weekly, or depending how long you want to do it. If you want to do it for a quarter, then maybe 12 questions. Like, here are the 12 most important questions that a new believer. That also depends on that. It depends on, is the young person a new believer? Are they in a leadership role? Are they Leader Trek has some resources as well. That's leadertreks.com, I believe. You could always check with them. They have some good resources. But yeah, I would see based on the student, if you customize it and saying this is what I'm going to do with you, what we're going to do as a one-on-one, and then I think it works out a lot better when you customize it to the student versus, hey, we're all going to do this. And I like the idea of coming. I just thought of that. Just coming up with 12 questions, and maybe let them ask the questions. Say, could you come up with? I'm going to come up with 10. Can you come up with two? And then or divide it evenly and say, I'll come up with 6 questions and you come up with 6 questions, and we'll cover that together. So I think that works. If you, like I said, customize it to your student, where they at in the journey, and find out what their learning style is. That would probably be my suggestion on that. And thank you, Jeff, for the question. Last question here that I have that was asked is how do you deal with critical youth leaders? If you have a youth leader on your team that is not complimentary, let's say, um, you know, that they tend to judge events, or maybe they're judging you, or they're judging the whole youth ministry. I would say that if I had a leader like that on my team, if I had an overly critical leader, I would say, first of all, they're not doing me any favors. And what I would do is I'd give them an opportunity to change their mindset. I would ask some questions, and a lot of it has to do with up front. What are the expectations you have? What were the expectations you have of your leaders when you asked them to volunteer? If part of what the expectation was is bring in a positive attitude and add value to the youth ministry, well, then you can call them on that and say, hey, listen, I know you're critical of these things, but we did say let's be proactive here. I mean, do you have a suggestion? It's one thing to complain. It's another thing to contribute. If you have something to contribute, that's great. If all you want to do is complain, that doesn't help anything. That's not helping the process at all. And so, I'm going to give them an opportunity to change their mindset. Also, I would say this: are they being overly critical, or are you being overly sensitive? Right? The criticism may be valid. You have to be able to say, you know, is what they're saying, weigh it out and say, is what they're saying true or not true? If it's true and you just don't like the way they said it, that's one thing. If it's not true and you still don't like the way they said it, then you have to ask yourself, well, is this volunteer going to make it long term? Are they going to make it with me after a conversation? Because then it looks like, look, are they telling you the criticism? Are you seeing it on social? Are you hearing it from other people? A lot of that plays in the dynamics of how you handle it. Because if you're hearing it secondhand, well, that makes it an uncomfortable conversation. If you're seeing it on social, that's an entirely another different, thing that you got going on there. But I would give them an opportunity to kind of change their mindset, and I would come from a place of curiosity and say, "Look, I'm just wondering, what would you have done different to change the outcome of this event or this youth meeting?" Come from a place of curiosity. It's not to start an argument, because that's not going to help you at all. And if you want to maybe you have a good youth worker, but your youth worker is being overly critical for some reason. And I would also throw in the mix that you don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know what's happening with them. Maybe they're overly critical about everything. Maybe they're just on the edge about whatever's going on in their world. And so I would encourage you to talk and have a good conversation with them if it's happening over and over again. One time you kind of go, okay. And then you kind of test it over time. Once again, is there any truth to it? And if there is, then you've got to not be overly sensitive to it, but respond to it in a way that's going to be loving and kind, and go, you know what? You're absolutely right. We should have had more volunteers for that. You know what? You're right. We should have done this. And concede and say, you know what? You're right. That's going to, first of all, if you have to be willing to admit your own mistakes, that you got to have some humility to be able to do that. And then think, well, what's going on in their life? What are they facing right now? That's a challenge that's making them overly critical, if that's the case. Maybe something is that. Or maybe their whole attitude towards the youth ministry changed. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they need a break. Maybe they need a hug. Maybe they need a Snickers. You're not you when you're hungry. So why don't you just give them a Snickers for crying out loud? You don't know. So I would just say keep it in mind. Keep this volunteer in mind about how well you trained them. Keep in mind that their criticism may be true, and you have to check your own feelings. Am I being overly sensitive to appropriate criticism? And then, uh, lastly, what's going on in their world? What's happening with them? What's maybe bringing this up? Is there something going on that you're maybe not aware of that, out of curiosity, from a curious point of view and a humble point of view, you can ask them about it, and then come to some resolution where you don't lose a volunteer. The end goal, hopefully, is not your end goal is not to just fire or get rid of anybody that disagrees with you, but certainly you don't want to have somebody on your team long term who's going to be working against you. So it's best to resolve those things early, talk to them, get to know their heart a little bit, and it becomes a great moment that could solidify your relationship. Whereas if you mishandle it, well, then that's going to make that relationship all the more strained, and they're probably still going to be going to church with you. So you might as well work that out, right? Work with your volunteers, and they'll work with you, right? But that's it. I want to thank Jeff Blakely for the question. Jeff Blakey for the question today. Thank you, Jeff. If you're once again, you are going to be around next Wednesday, prayer 8 a.m. And then 11 a.m. Traditionally, 11 a.m. is our time that we get together. If you have questions for the next time, if you're watching this in the future when I'm not live, then go ahead and leave your questions down below, and I'll be happy to answer if I'm best I can and contribute, and see if I can't help you with an answer. But otherwise, if you have youth meeting tonight, I wish you all the blessings in the world. I pray that you'll be good with yourself. You'll feel good about it. I pray that your students hear what the Word of God is saying. I pray that they hear what the Holy Spirit is saying, and that many lives will be changed in your youth meeting. So, but that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for being a part today. Don't forget, be sure to go check out the discipleproject.net if you want blogs, if you want to check out my other things, the podcast, all those other things. And then don't forget also gumroad.com/youthmenresources if you're looking for resources. So, but that is it, guys. Thank you so much for being a part today, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Have a good evening, everybody. Bye-bye.